welcome to Stay in Your Lane, a recap and review podcast about Serial Experiments Lane. I am your host, Loco Masi. With me is my co-host, Bethner Masamune.
Unfortunately, your free trial for Lain has run out. Please pay $39.99 in order to continue using your Lain.
Alice.
All I can think about is that Lain would have been happier if she had had a cat.
And Jenner.
But she's like a bear furry. She's got a bear persona. How is a
So,
cat
ergo,
gonna
she needs a bear.
address?
You
Yeah,
can't keep a pet bear, Jenner.
but she's a
Not with
bear
that
furry. Yeah, exactly. That's a quitters. Hi, I'm gay. I'm Jenner. I've got serious stuff to say this episode.
She has a cat, but it's in a bear costume at all times.
Yeah, put the cat in a bear costume. There we go. Solve it. No. Okay, they make
the cat's name is Bear.
They make these tiny little costumes for hamsters and gerbils. And they actually have a tiny bear costume that you can put your hamster and gerbil in. Thus, though I would say
that is intensely cute.
that's very. I would say hamsters and gerbils and rats are a little too short-lived for Lain. She's got a lot of trauma around losing things. So get her something that lives a little bit longer, like a cat. Cats can live like 14 to 20 years. So yeah, get her a cat. Let's all love Lain.
Our episode opens with the same opening shot as always, as the the characters say, "Oh, okay, so that's how it works. I had no idea the world was this simple. I always thought the world was such a big and scary place. Once you figure it out, it's so easy."
I figured it all
Lain
out.
says everything.
Sorry, go ahead.
Lain says everything that I just said,
Mm-hmm.
and then another voice says, "See, I told you so." Don't know who this voice is. It sounds like a woman, so it's not Eri. I don't think it sounds like Chisa. Chisa's the only other, prominent female character whose voice I don't really know. So I don't know if this is supposed to be Chisa or who this is supposed to be. Or if it's supposed to be anyone.
I would like to say a minor correction. This episode does not start out like almost every other episode. Because the whisper thing didn't happen. And it instead starts with this intro over it. With this monologue of, you found me here, right? Well, looks like you caught me in another sticky situation. Like that kind of thing. But yeah, back to you.
Jenner, that's usually how these episodes start. The title card doesn't show up until after the opening shots.
Oh, interesting. Well, go on then.
But yeah, I think I forgot to say it anyway, so this is Layer 12 Landscape. Not to be confused with Layer 12 Portrait. Our first new shot in the episode is of the classroom. Alice is sad, trying to figure out what's happening. While she's deep in thought, Lain is gossiping. I don't know what exactly they're gossiping about, but apparently Lain just said something incredibly rude and is refusing to apologize. Eventually, the two students she's talking to start talking to themselves. So Lain turns around to smile. She doesn't do the evil Lain smile, but she does do just a weirdly serene smile while Alice is panicking.
Yeah, the lanes seem to have merged because this is a perfectly reasonable smile in just the absolute worst context.
The serenity of this smile is not quite inhuman, but it's a little, just slightly uncanny valley. Like it looks like a statue smile, like a statue you'd see like in like a church.
Alice gets a text. The text is from Lain, and it says, "You should just rewrite bad memories."
Mm-hmm.
Just fucking do that, come on.
Have you tried turning your memories off and then never turning them back on again?
This is what causes Alice to realize what's happened. But in kind of a did you notice the dancing gorilla moment, did you notice Lain did not have time to send this text?
Yeah.
Because she was staring at Alice the whole time. We never see her move for her phone.
Does she just do it with her mind now?
She's actually texting with her foot. She's very skilled like that.
I guess it would make sense if she could do it with her mind now. Just kind of like... We've seen how connected she is.
Anyways.
Well, I wanted to springboard off of what Alice just said and have a serious discussion, if that's okay, unless you really want to rush through all this. Alright, so I want to talk about borderline personality disorder. And I want to talk about attention deficit disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So, two of the symptoms with both of these mental illnesses, severe mental illnesses, borderline personality disorder is heavily stigmatized. It's actually a mental illness that I have myself that I've been diagnosed with, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is not as severe. It's actually often depicted in media as like a cute, kind of quirky thing, but it's actually kind of a special kind of help to have. Anyway, I also have that. And both of these mental illnesses can, not always, but can have the symptom of being very sensitive to other people's emotions and having that feeling of being ultra connected to everybody. It's called like hyper empathy with ADHD, and it's called hyper affect, AFFECT, with borderline personality disorder. And how it works is it's like you have sonar. This is the best way I can describe it. And you can feel, you have a seismograph. This is a better way to put it. You have a seismograph. And you can feel other people's emotions. And when other people are upset, they tremor, like an earthquake is coming. Right? You can recognize, there's seismic activity here. And you react to that. So that's the ADHD saying, there's a tremor. The borderline personality interplay with that is the amplified affect of you recognize person is in distress or person's vibes are off, and you react to that. When a neurotypical person or somebody without borderline personality disorder reacts, it's at a normal, quote-unquote, level, right? It's a normal, acceptable reaction to somebody being upset, like, hey, buddy, you doing okay? With somebody with borderline personality, they are feeling those off vibes at an exponential spike. So there's feeling like a 2 on the Richter scale, like a 7 on the Richter scale. So you're coming at them as a 2, but they're reading it as a 7. And they react at 7 level to your 2. To that person's 2. And it's really overwhelming to exist like that. Having this feeling of being very connected and knowing what everybody else is feeling and wanting to make sure that they don't feel as awful as you think they are feeling, because you are feeling them feeling their shit way more intensely than they really are. One of the ways that I deal with that is I've laid out this scale system with my spouse and the closest people in my life, where I come to them and I say, I'm reading you at number. What number are you really at? And that lets me know how to react in that situation. But Lain hasn't done that yet. But when Alice talks about this way in which Lain is connected to everybody, I can't help but recognize it as that metaphor of that feeling that I have of being the supernaturally connected to everybody. And in the form that Lain has taken here, it is a literal manifestation of that through the Wired. And I think in my opinion, it's reaching me as a viewer, as an anthropomorphization of that feeling of hyperconnectivity that you have when you have these two mental illnesses. And I'm just going to close off by saying that when you have mental illnesses in most societies, and especially in this society, which is the United States of America that we all live in, it's basically assumed by everybody that it's your responsibility and your problem that you have to deal with. And you are solely responsible for going out, managing yourself, and getting the help you need. But getting the help you need is very, very difficult. But basically this individual responsibility that we have entrenched in our culture basically offloads all of the labor of getting your shit together onto the person who has a very difficult time controlling themselves, period, and can get easily overwhelmed if they have a lot of mental illnesses that have a really unfun relationship and interactivity with each other like I do. And it basically, to me, feels like a lot of victim blaming. And so when we get to the point, but I'm going to start it now, is I want to say that I'm actually really proud of Lain in this very strange way. Because she's ahead of what I consider to be the curve for taking responsibility and being accountable for who you are and how you are when you have mental illnesses. Because she recognizes that even though she didn't control herself when she did some things, and it wasn't even her when she did those things exactly, though it was still her, that what she's done is still something that she's done that she's responsible for. And we'll get to that when we get to that. But there you go. And now you can go back to going through the thing, but there's serious talk about mental illness from Jenner. I like the show, by the way.
We then cut to a shot of what appears to be Lain on a very static-filled television. She says, people only have substance within the memories of others. That's why there were all kinds of me's. There weren't a lot of me's. I was just inside of all sorts of people, that's all. This is the Lain that exists in Alice's mind. And this is the Alice that exists in Lane's mind. The writers of this show insist that they've never seen Ava.
Well, that's not Hegelian at all.
I believe them, especially because they only insisted that up until episode 4. That is, by the time they wrote episode 5, I think they sat down to watch Evangelion just to see why everybody said they were... Why does everybody say this feels like Ava? Oh no, yeah, that's why they say it feels like Ava.
For me, like, again, this is making a lot of... For me, this is also a common defense mechanism, I guess. A survival strategy, I would think would be the better word to use. Where you try to rationalize and make it make sense, because rationalizing it and just explaining it to yourself and understanding it in that academic way, it gives you some semblance of control over that uncontrollable. No matter how illusory or crackpot that understanding you foment is. It's why so many people are susceptible to conspiracy theories. If you can make it make sense, you can just get them caught up in them. And making it make sense and giving somebody answers and explanations is a really great way to get your hooks into them. So a lot of like faiths and cults and churches and you know, phony psychologists like fucking Dr. Phil will pretend that they have all the answers and come to you with the snake oil and rope you in and like scam you and shit. So you gotta be careful out there. But yeah, the natural instinct for me and for many people is to just try to understand it. What is wrong with me? Because you feel like nobody else is like this. You feel so alone. So you try to rationalize it. You try to understand it. You try to make it all make sense. It has to all come together, right? And again, it just gives you that semblance of control over that thing that is so uncontrollable, but that has so much control over your entire life. That you're trapped with this thing. For me, it's like a demon, a monster inside of me that you just live with. It's like a fucked up sitcom, right, where you're just living there with a berserk ape that just like goes wild, and you're just like, welp, the ape's at it again, and then you eat your pizza. Back to you.
The next scene is in Siberia, which I like to remind our audience at this point is just an empty warehouse. The DJ is still there, though. I don't know what he thinks he's doing.
What happened to this?
Because he's not DJing. I don't think it was ever real. I think Taro was brainwashing everybody into thinking it was a club, and it was just the bottom of a warehouse.
It's just that,
and I guess he never stopped.
It's just that DJ's like practice
brainwashing
space,
the DJ.
like his practice space, and like some random kids who just hang out there sometimes to do drugs. I guess.
Gotta do e-drugs in this abandoned warehouse.
I guess that makes sense. That JJ the DJ is just using this place to practice. Because I think Taro says that JJ was already there when Taro found that place. Taro and his friends are hanging out while Taro is surfing the web in VR. He apparently reads something on Lain, starts laughing, and then when he's asked what he's laughing about, he says, it just so happened that I kissed an angel. Which he means like biblical style angel, so he should be freaking the fuck out.
Man, if only it was one of those Old Testament style angels, you know.
Yeah, that's what they said, biblical
right,
angel.
Yeah. But you know, you got the romance angels, right? The romance era angels that are just like, you know, just hot babies or whatever.
Maybe he is into the monstrosities. We can't rule this out.
I want them Old Testament angels with the 20 eyes, and the flaming blades, and the weird droning. I want that shit. Hook me up with that shit. I'll fuck it.
If it ain't body horror, it ain't an angel. That's what I always say.
I'm not into it if it doesn't have at least several orifices that may or may not be orifices.
Modern Bible can get the fuck out. Bayonetta's angels are the best ones.
Mm-hmm.
The next scene is a news report. The anchor says Protocol 7 is expected to allow the seamless sharing of information between the wired and the real world. And now the following message. Let's all love Lain. Let's all love Lain. Let's all love Lain. Lain.
Sure.
For the record, that's why I didn't want to name our podcast Let's All Love Lain, because that line is a fucking jump scare in the actual TV show.
Lol.
I liked that I came up with stay in your lane because there's multiple lanes and we have to stick to our lane.
Yeah, I as soon as we said "stay in your lane," that was going to become the podcast's name,
It's pretty good.
no matter what,
I'm a genius.
because it's an actual funny pun.
I'm
But
a genius sometimes, but I feel bad because like people are gonna come here to like listen to a podcast about us ripping on it, and instead there's like 15 solid minutes of me talking about severe mental illness and suicide and trauma. Sorry, people who got to this episode, but also not sorry.
it turns out we actually like the show.
This show is tackling some very serious stuff, like, and it's like overt, but like also covert. If you don't deal with this shit, you don't even realize, and you just think like, this is so zany and weird and it does not make sense. No, y'all, this show is talking to you about mental illness and cults and just a lot of things.
We're 12 episodes in. I feel like if anybody's listened this far, they know what they're in for with us by this point. But if you started with episode 12, why did you do that?
What's up with you?
You weirdo.
No, hey, don't kink shame them. Hey, you person who started with episode 12, I respect you.
I mean this in the nicest way, but I fully believe somebody could watch 12 episodes of our podcast and be blindsided by the way Jenner is talking in this episode. Because some people just refuse to pay attention to the stuff they watch, except for very select moments.
Again, like, I'm gonna have to do, like, a special bonus episode when I have time, probably, like, after we watch the last one, to just really talk about the stuff that they go into, and the metaphors and allegories that they're using to express what it's like to have certain mental illnesses in certain situations. That, for me...
It's not enough to have 10-minute long soliloquies on the main episode. You need a whole hour-long episode to yourself.
Well, if I don't, then you don't get the whole thing. Like, people need to understand how... Like, I really feel strongly about this. That y'all, you viewers, you listeners, and you, my co-hosts, need to understand.
Fuckers.
The shit that this show is art, and what this show is doing is so good for mental health representation and really kind of putting a face to the reality that you live when you're dealing with a lot of this shit. Like, this is good. Like, I feel spoken, like, to, right, and spoken for, but not in that way in which somebody is seizing my voice, but more like somebody has interviewed me and is now quoting me.
I feel like you're actually going to do it. You're actually going to come up with the only good theory of, like, what if it's all in their head.
I mean, it is, but it isn't. Like, this isn't, it is all in...
It's a representation.
Yeah. It's all...
You know what I mean.
Yeah. This is, like, I want to, like I've said before and I'll say it again, this is a very experimental anime. But what the people behind it are trying to do, or at least one of the things that I recognize them trying to do, because I'm willing to admit that this is a very complex, complicated anime that is tackling way too many things at once and trying to do a lot of things at once. Trying to say a lot of things at once. It's something I identified with you earlier, Luke. I remember, and you were like, why are you pooping on it? No, I think, like, it's trying to be very, very big because it's trying to say something very, very big. As a creator, I get caught up in that, too. I want to put, like, a million things in there because I have so much I want to say. That's why I go on for, like, 20 minutes here. And you just can't fit all that in, which is why I'm going to make that bonus episode so anybody who wants to can listen to it. But you just need to kind of pick and choose. We're having this issue with the game we're making now. We want to add too much shit. But anyway, my point is that, like, this show is trying to do a lot of shit. And I really appreciate what it is trying to do. And I'm really happy with what it has done. But it would have been a much less jarring, confusing show if they had boiled it down a little bit more into just focusing on a couple things. But I understand why they didn't. Because all these things going on are actually, believe it or not, linked to each other. And that's the metaphor that Lain is built on top of. Is how there's this interconnectivity between all these things. This comorbidity between grief, mental illness, the weirdness of life, the suddenness of the technological age just pouncing on us, and how kind of broadsided all of us, and how we scrambled to understand it. All these things that it's addressing at once, just those handful of things that I've identified, are all being tackled at once because they're all interconnected. And you don't want to leave anything off that storyboard table because you want to tell the full story of that. So the person at that pegboard, right, is there trying to tell that story, and I really appreciate this show for it. I know I ragged on it a lot in a previous episode, but it was more identifying this is going to be a mess, but it's a beautiful mess.
The next scene is a monologue from Days. He is talking about human evolution, which is always a good sign in fiction. Nobody ever gets human evolution wrong in fiction.
You know what? I hate evolutionary psychology. And I'm not going to say it anymore, but fuck evolutionary psychology. Back to you.
He says that I think the point of his speech is that the biology of man is more or less evolved as much as it's going to, and if it's going to evolve, it's going to evolve outside of the body, which isn't evolution, but whatever. We're speaking a little metaphorically here. He's not a biologist; he is a computer guy. I feel like there was one line I wanted to say. Ah, yes. If the physical limitations of the body restricts mankind's evolution, it would be as if the fall of the species known as man was predetermined by a god that doesn't exist. I feel like that's the quintessential Deus line. Because, like, you have an emotional reaction to it, and then you look over it, and it's like, actually, what the hell are you talking about?
You say Deus, and I was thinking Deus Ex. That's what that sounds like. It sounds like the early Deus Ex boss who thinks that he's a lot cooler than he actually is.
I mean, that also sums up Eri.
Very true.
We get a shot of Lain in a brightly lit street with normal shadows, and I just have this in here because Lain looks genuinely happy, and the scene isn't scary at all, and we don't get a whole lot of that.
That's just more suspicious now.
Even more suspicious.
Everything's happy. What the fuck?
We got to a parking lot. The men in black are in a parked car. Carl is smoking, and the other agent, whose name is Lin Sui Shi, she is X, spelled in English is XI, and I'm probably mispronouncing that because it's just a hard consonant sound for English speakers because it's too close to she for most English speakers to differentiate. But that's his name, and I figured I should say it at least once. But Lin Sui Shi thought that Carl had stopped smoking. Lin says, "Why is this happening? We did everything right." And Carl says, "It means that our client wasn't the only one who thought the knives would be trouble. Our client was in contact with Eri, or maybe it was Eri the whole time." Lin says, "Shut the fuck up about Eri. He's dead." Carl says, "He's not dead. Whether he had a body or not doesn't matter. Never mattered." Another car pulls in. It's driven by the boss. He didn't give a name when Lain met him, but he is the CEO type guy that Lain met. He pays them for their services and then tells them to run to a place with no power lines and no satellite coverage. Lin says there's no place like that on the Earth and you know it. And the boss says, if you're going to run, you need to find a place like that. And now that the wired and the real world are fully connected, something wonderful is going to happen. I'm looking forward to it, aren't you? Aren't you happy, human? You're going to be free.
I think the wonderful needs heavy scare quotes.
I think as soon as he said wonderful, they should have shot him.
Mm-hmm.
That is a dangerous word to be thrown around right now. Lin dies, followed by Carl. Carl's attempts to determine what Lin is seeing results in him seeing Lain. The effect reminds me of the Hanged Man from JoJo.
I also made that joke when we watched the episode.
Yeah, I can kind of see it.
Yeah, there is a figure that's kind of shuffling around. He's very hard to see, and I thought it looked like Hanged Man, but it actually isn't drawn the same way at all. It's just the power made me think, oh yes, Hanged Man. Moving in a reflective surface, but there's no mirror world. That would be ridiculous.
Carl, there's no such thing as a world inside the wired. That's impossible.
We then cut to Alice going to Lane's house. I forgot how early this scene started, because it takes us to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
It's like half the episode, I think. The doorbell sounds off, the gate isn't locked, and their door is open, so Alice thinks that something's up and decides to check in on Lain even if she's not invited. The house is an absolute wreck, which, like, okay, fine, Lain doesn't care about, cleaning up after herself anymore. But it looks like she also just splattered paint all over the walls. I don't know why she would do that. That's not the kind of stain that just happens on its own and you don't realize it. You do that on purpose. Alice takes off her shoes, and I understand that is a very common thing in Japan, but Alice, you really don't want to walk through this in your socks. You want your shoes on. Like, what, are you worried about getting the floor dirty? Really?
Hey,
Are you
hey,
kidding
hey,
me?
in Japan, this is just like it becomes a habit, actually. I'm not like Japan, you always take your shoes off when you enter somebody's house. And it's such a like traditional thing to do and a sign of respect that it actually does become a conditioned ingrained behavior to just automatically without even thinking about it take your shoes off when you enter a building, no matter how gross that
Yeah,
building is. Uh, when we had visited my spouse's host family in Nagoya, their sink had over like they'd broken a pipe in their sink, which I helped them repair, by the way. But it had gotten water all over the floor of their kitchen, and they still just walked in the floor of their kitchen with their shoes off. And I was just like, why? It was just so automatic. It's fine.
you
I,
gotta take your socks off too. Like, wet bare feet is fine. Wet socks are awful.
Hmm.
mm-hmm.
That was a problem when I first went to college. I didn't have rain boots, but it just so happened I had flip flops, and it turns out it's just as good. It doesn't prevent you from getting wet, but it makes you care less about getting wet. Oh yeah, Mika's back. She says beep beep beep, and then Alice does what I think all of us do when we see Mika in this state, and huddle against the wall and cry. And when she looks back up, Mika's gone.
Oh,
And I
good,
just have to
great.
note, I just have to note, like, Alice had no idea that anything like this was going on with Lain. She just thought Lain was kind of a weird, quiet child.
Yeah, so I guess if there's anybody who did start watching 12 episodes in, it's actually Alice.
Yeah, like, I would love a cut of, like, Lain from Alice's perspective. Because, like, Alice has been completely walled off from all the really, really weird shit.
She's awkward, she's awkward. Hey, she's kind of warming up. Oh, now she's peeping on me. Oh, now she's on an alien
She,
body.
now she's naked and in the sky. Okay, maybe not completely walled off. But she's never been in Lane's house before. She doesn't know how bad things are getting with Lane until she comes to her room. I just have it written down as Alice gets to Lane's room and finds out that it is Wikipedia's server room. Lane emerges from a pile of wires like she was getting out of bed. She looks considerably paler than the Lane from earlier in the episode. Alice asks Lane what she's done, and Lane says that she's just been watching. I took that to mean that Lane was here the whole time and that the Lane in the classroom wasn't real. Because the two Lanes look different, and as I said earlier, Lane in the classroom didn't have time to send a text, but Lane in her bedroom did.
Yeah, I can see that. Like,
I don't.
I mean, we're going off of like
Yeah,
basically nothing to figure out because there's just at this stage, anyone could be any of them could be any of them. But
yeah, and I also think it's an effective way to establish like the real world being the same as the Wired at this point. Like Lane can physically show up in the classroom without ever leaving her bedroom. Like nobody can tell that she's not actually there anymore. It's
Technology is
just like a
incredible.
chat program.
hey, look, it's Lain. Which Lain?
Alice says, "Lane, I thought I had gone crazy, but I didn't. Why, Lane? Why did you leave only me? Why did you only leave my memories alone? Why do I always have to remember those horrible things? Do you really hate me that much?" And at that line, we cut back to Lane, who goes from a slight, nonplussed smile to looking genuinely shocked as Alice says, "I can't take this."
I remember when I was very, very young and dealing with a lot of like anger at God and religion for all the awful things that happened in my life. That I said a lot of the same things that Alice is saying now to Lane is, why did you do this to me? This just understanding of why are bad things happening to me when I haven't done anything to deserve them because, you know, Christianity as it exists in this country, or at least as how I was exposed to it and how a lot of people were exposed to it, kind of teaches you that like suffering and hurt are punishments for sin. And so you're always like, well, what am I doing wrong? And why is this happening to me? And why is God doing this to me? Like the Christians tell you that God is all merciful and forgiving. And so if you just, give yourself to Jesus, you'll be cleansed of sin and your life will be good. And yet, no, it continues to be miserable. And like, why?
Who's Job?
What?
I said, "Who's Job?" I've never read the book of
Yeah,
Job.
right? Fuck, yeah, right? So, you know,
It's not like there's literally something in the Bible that contradicts this, but whatever.
I hate the story of Job because preachers kind of bend it to. Oh, I'm going to get off on a theology tangent. Okay, so I have two things.
Welcome to Stay in Your Job.
Here, I have two hot takes about this, which is one: what happened to Job was not okay, and fuck God. Like, you can't just show up. I think I've actually had this hot take on this podcast before, right? And say, I'm gonna devil with down.
Non-zero chance.
I'm gonna devil went down with Georgia with you, with the God, with the devil, right? And I'm just gonna make this dude's life utter misery, and you're gonna see that he's gonna stay loyal to me. This is a test of his faith, and like, then he like kills his entire family and like does all these horrible things to him, and just keeps making his life more and more miserable. And Job just like perseveres, and at the very end, God's like, ta-da! See, I proved it to you. Well done, Job, and just manifests a completely new family. What the fuck? That's not the family that he fell in love with, that he spent all that time in, that he invested in. That's like those are brand new people pulled out of nowhere, right? Like, you can't just kill somebody's whole family and then say, okay, here's a new family. Like, that's not. If I walked into your house, Loka, and murdered your parents and just gave you new parents, that wouldn't be okay. It doesn't undo it. That trauma and that lust is still there.
Gonna say one thing about Job and then move on before we get bogged down talking about Job, because we really don't have time tonight. Everybody likes to think that Job just stood there the whole time and took it. Like, no, Job is incredibly pissed off the entire book. He threatens to sue God at one point.
Yeah.
He says, bring God to any courtroom and let him testify against me. This is bullshit, God.
Yeah.
What's up, God? I know the law.
Yeah.
Let's do this, God. I know the law.
Yeah, I mean, it was obscene. No, one more. I wanted to talk about the story of Abraham and Isaac, I think is the son, right? Yes. Abraham takes Isaac up to sacrifice him because God demands that Abraham sacrifice Isaac. And so Abraham like slaps Isaac down on the slab and like raises his hand up, and I just remember all the preachers being like, how sad for Abraham to have to sacrifice his only son, to prove his faith to God. And I'm like, what about Isaac? What about the literal fucking child who's been pulled up this mountain and tied up like cattle and nearly killed? Has anybody thought about Isaac, the sacrifice, and the situation that he's in, and how an angel just comes in and says, psych, here's a deer, but now Isaac just has to be like, oh, that's fine, then it's okay because God said so, and continue to live in the house with a man who nearly fucking killed him? That's not okay?
This is probably the mildest correction, but Isaac was like in his mid-20s at the time.
Still.
Well, it just, like Abraham was in his 60s. Like, if Isaac didn't want to go along with it, he could have fought his way out.
Yeah, like, he's a grown-ass man.
Well, what victim blaming?
I mean, most people think that Isaac
take
was
an
like
old
a
man,
kid.
it's his fault.
Isaac's a grown-ass man. Like, they always skip that part because it's not as dramatic that way.
I mean, your dad comes to you and says, God told me to do this, and they're like a prophet of God. You're gonna, like, not go along with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I beat him up, ripped him, but I'm different.
ripped Isaac, but I'm different.
Alright, let's get away from theology talk, but those are my actual hot takes. Like, why does everybody think this is sad for Abraham when it's Isaac who was nearly killed? That was a traumatic experience.
Lain says, no, you've got it all wrong. I didn't want to hurt you. Alice says, liar, look at what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And Lain says, but you're okay, aren't you, Alice? You are my friend, even without connecting to me, Alice. You're my only friend, Alice. Even without connecting to me. I think she says it that many times I didn't just fuck up writing notes. Alice says, what do you mean, connecting? And Lain says, connecting to me and everyone. And at this point, she goes in for a kiss. Lain, that is, goes in for a kiss or something. She leans towards Alice.
Gals being pals.
Alice shouts, stop it, and runs away. And then Lain says, but Alice, I really do love you. And I'm going to be honest, I watched this with Jenner, and I was expecting, like, a much more animated reaction to that line.
It just, like, this is what I wanted, but not in this level of inappropriateness. Like,
not like this.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I talked to you about, like, how, like, the fetish of her with the Alice, her being Alice with the teacher has that power imbalance, right? And we'd actually talked about this while we
Mm-hmm.
watched this show. What kind of power disadvantage are you at when your partner is fucking God?
And I believe my response was, "We've already shown that Alice is into that."
Yeah, and just because she's into it, yeah. But look how, what is she into it right now? In this
No,
essay, exactly.
I I just wanted to say something I thought was
It
clever.
was clever.
Uh, Alice says, "Do you know what you're saying?" And Lane says, "Humans were originally connected at an unconscious level. I reconnected them. That's
At
all.
this, I
I don't do
screamed
anything."
really, really loud because fuck Carl Jung. But do go on. The collective consciousness is outrages me on a level that just like puts red in my eyes, and so I completely checked out for the next 3 minutes. Do go on.
I I don't do anything. It doesn't matter which is real. I'm in both. I'm a program designed to destroy the barrier between the wired and the real world. You and everyone else, Alice, you're just applications. The truth is, you don't need bodies. At that line, Alice seems to like get a hold of herself. She also puts both of her hands on Lane's face, and Lane reacts to this in a very appropriate way. She's just like, "Huh?"
Like,
It's a weirdly funny and like very human reaction from Lane in
yeah,
this
for
moment.
me, like, just getting
As
back on the thing here really quick is for a lot of people, it can be very easy to conflate your reality and what you want and what you understand of things to be like, everybody else must feel the same way. So if you're like, I don't need this meat body, then obviously everybody else feels the same way. But just because you don't feel like you need a body doesn't mean other people don't feel like they need a body. Maybe Alice likes having a body, and maybe even Lain likes having a body. She's just been told that she doesn't want to like having a body. Like, you can't just, like, assume that your understanding of the universe is some sort of global understanding of the universe, that you have it all figured out, and make these executive decisions for everybody else. Everybody has a right to their own agency and on their own terms with some limitations, like fuck Nazis. No, you don't get to just march around and kill people. But yeah, I mean, for me, that was the thing that really bothered me is you don't need a body. No, 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 Lane. You might not need a body, but you don't get to make that choice for Alice. Back to you.
as Alice caresses Lane's face, she says, "You're wrong. I don't really understand what you're saying, but I think you're wrong, and I took a screenshot of that, and I'm going to turn it into a reaction image."
Yeah.
Um, your body's cold, but you're alive, Lane. Mine too. See? And she places Lane's hand directly over her heart, and she says, "My heart, it's beating, 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 beating." And then they both say beating in time with each other
Mm-hmm.
and laugh a bit afterwards. And Lane says, "But why? Why is it beating like that?" Alice says, "Because I'm scared, Lane. I'm terrified." Elaine says, "Really? But you're smiling." And Alice says, "Yeah, I guess I am. But I'm scared. I've always been scared. I wonder why." And Lane says, "I wonder why." And Deus says, "Because she is scared of losing her body. All sensations are caused by impulses in the brain. You just need to block the unpleasant ones and only select the pleasant ones." Lane says, "Is that so?" And Alice says, "Who are you talking to, Lane? Because she's really out of the loop. Deus has been here for 3 episodes. Alice is not aware of that. Deus says, "If you really love her, why don't you try connecting with her?" Lane says, "I'm not sure." And Alice says, "Who are you talking to?" Deus says, "You must have a bug. Very well. Come with me and I'll give you a thorough debugging."
That is the most threatening thing anyone has ever said.
I've used that as a pickup line once.
That is so threatening.
Time for revision 2, motherfucker.
I feel like using that as a pickup line is a good method for me to get kicked in the nuts. Deus puts his hand out for Lane to take, and it manifests beside her for Alice to see. Lane says, "What I don't understand is you, God." And Alice says, "God? You're talking to God?"
Oh, you're talking to God. Okay, yeah, no, that doesn't make this
Excuse
better.
me? I the English dub delivery is more like, "You're talking to God, aren't you?" Like she's, in awe of this as she's figuring it out. But I just, if I were reading that line, it would be like, "God? You're talking to God? You mean the one in heaven?
No, not that one.
No, the real one. Uh, Days says, what don't you understand, Lane? Lain says, what you did was remove devices from the wired. But without those things, you couldn't have accomplished your goal in the first place. Day says, yes, those are things which accompanied human evolution. Humans who are further evolved than others have a right to greater abilities. And Lane says, but then, who gave you those rights? The program that inserted code synced to the Earth's characteristic frequency in the Protocol 7, which would raise the collective unconscious to the conscious level. Did you really come up with the idea by yourself? Day starts to get mad and says, what are you getting at? No, it can't be. Are you telling me there really is a god? Lane says it doesn't matter. With no body, you couldn't possibly understand.
Oh shit! Oh fuck! The consequences.
If it isn't my old pal, the consequences of my actions. After saying that, Lane goes to comfort her girlfriend, Alice. And Dave says, no, I'm omnipotent. I gave you a body here in the real world. You are omnipresent, but scattered all over the wired. I gave you an ego. Do you mean to say... And then Lane says, if that's true of me, then what about you? And Deus literally screams, I'm different, you hear me? I'm different. Rip to you, Lane, but I'm different.
Couldn't be me. Couldn't possibly be me.
It, I've never seen somebody go like from God to Redditor so fucking fast. Like, obviously, the satire was always present. We never really doubted that Deus was a Redditor, but he never really dipped into the specific languages until around this point.
I would say this whole scene feels like something from Akira.
Oh yeah, I was just about to say. Deus manifests himself in the bedroom in an Akira-like manner, by which I mean the weird flesh blob at the end of the movie. Elaine says the wired isn't an upper layer of the real world. Deus says, what do you mean? And Elaine says, inside the wired you were God, all right, but what about before the wired was created? You were just an acting God, standing in for the real God who was waiting for the wired to reach its current state. Deus says, an acting God? That can't be! And tries to crush Alice and Lane with his gross Tetsuo body. Alice cries out. Lane tries to comfort her. The subs have Lane say, a body doesn't mean anything to you, right? Whereas the English dub, I think, is a bit more clear by having her say, what about now? Do you still think having a body is meaningless? Like, all you're talking about, oh, you don't need bodies, and then the first time not having a body is slightly inconvenient to you, you manifest a body? Fuck you, God. Lane then crushes Deus with all the tech in her room. Deus dies. Episode ends. One comment I wanted to make on the podcast. I like that Lane's technomancer abilities don't just make her like supernaturally good at computers. She can also move computers with her mind.
I mean, that's a part of being good with computers, is being able to kill somebody with them.
I I want that to be like a member of the X-Men. I want somebody who spends like 7 issues just hacking, and then somebody confronts him and he just like moves his arm and his like MacBook flies off the shelf and smacks somebody in the face.
Look, I'm just saying that if you can't kill God with a computer, you don't belong in Silicon Valley. Only somebody who can do that is allowed.
No. You have to,
Fucking tech bros, get the hell out.
If you can actually do that, then you're way too competent for Silicon Valley, and they are scared of you. You need to be able to convince people that you could do that via being disruptive and innovative and synergistic. But you never actually do it, because then if you do anything right, then they're going to want more.
This is what's going to kill Silicon Valley. This is somebody is going to crush Bill Gates with his own computers, and then it's going to be over for all of them.
It's true, actually. Computers are a hive mind. All of them are connected to Bill Gates, and when he dies, all the computers will die.
Hey, Bitcoin.
I meant more like. Go ahead.
Hey, Bitcoin miners, guess what? It was actually a problem that you got all of those graphics cards, motherfucker. You want to buy all of them up? Well, guess what? Now you can choke on them.
Just walking up to my Bitcoin mining operation and starts flying at me like that one boss in the first Mega Man game. Or I should have said Shovel Knight. More people have probably played Shovel Knight. So, thoughts on this episode? I had one thing I wanted to say about Alice going to see Lane. The whole sequence of Alice arriving at the house to see in much worse state than what she expected, to like Alice freaking the fuck out where Lane seems to be like more composed but is clearly in a worse place, mentally and emotionally. It's Alice like suddenly realizing what she has to do and managing to talk Lane out of her "I don't need a body" mindset, and back into realizing that a body is necessary. It felt like the way that you would write, shoot, and direct a scene where a character talks another character out of committing suicide to me, which is literally what it is. Because when Lane says she doesn't need a body, she was planning to just stay hooked up, stop eating, stop drinking, and then just wait for the body to die so she could live on the wire full time. But it's not presented as literally as that in the show. It's given the more philosophical bent in this instance. I guess they felt that they'd harped on giving up the body being a very literal thing so much in earlier episodes. They didn't need to draw attention to it in this one. Something about the way the whole thing was planned out and performed, especially how the climax and the falling action is just Lane or just Alice putting her hands on Lane's face and then holding Lane's hand against her own heart. Like if this were just a teen drama instead of a weird supernatural show, that would have been the climax of the episode. But instead, the climax of the episode is Lane killing God with her with her Macs and her PCs.
In hindsight, it was always going to be this. I mean, what is Lane but a JRPG that went horribly wrong?
Or horribly right.
Porque
I
no
feel
one
like this is
else.
exactly what a JRPG wants to be.
I mean, it's why not both? You know, it's
Fucking Tetsuya Nomura watching Lane going, God damn it, God fucking damn it, why didn't I do that? Son of a bitch.
Persona 6 looks great. I'm not sure who the mascot character is, but I'm liking it.
I mean, look, I just can't wait for Jack Frost to make an appearance in the final
God.
episode.
God.
Bless.
God just gets buried in computers and Jack Frost just runs up, hee-ho, and punches him in the face. Or whatever counts as a face on that thing. Hard to tell.
God goes to manifest and he manifests as Black Frost. You just have a cute snowman that's also slightly evil sitting in the room. Did anybody else have anything to say about this episode?
Yes. Hi. So, you know, what's been going on in my life lately? And I just wanted to talk a little bit about things that went on in this episode that actually spoke to me. It seemed like a timely episode to show up, considering everything that's been going on in my life lately. So, it's really, really awful when you have a bad mental health day and when you break down or melt down and lash out. And I always feel so terrible when it happens. Because I always kind of feel like there's this demon inside me that always has been me, but also isn't exactly me. And when that thing gets control of me, I just can't not unleash just so much destruction sometimes. I just cause so much hurt, and it can be difficult to digest and process and live with the fact that I've done that. Especially when I didn't have complete control over whether or not I could and couldn't do it. It seems like I just spark so fast. Like something gets me and I just lose it so quickly. There's very little chance that I ever catch myself in the moment and rein myself in and get it back together and get myself back on good footing. And I have lost track of the times where I've sat and I've wished I could just go back and change one of those moments or a handful of those moments just to make sure that they didn't happen or didn't happen that way. because of how badly I felt about having hurt those people I cared about or those people that I associated with each other. And it wasn't really about the effect it had on me socially or the opinions people might have gleaned from me socially, but more the harm that I did to them. Because I, again, am also in that place where I'm able to recognize the responsibility that I have as somebody with mental illnesses and the issues that I have, where I can't just explain away all the trouble and harm that I cause by just, I'm mentally ill, deal with it. There's got to be some push and shove. So I think we all can just wish, I think maybe at least I have wished that we could just erase it and start back over again. But God, what that, like, if you could do that, what that would do to a person. As Alice points us out, and as I think me and the Alice's podcast predicted, the episode before this whole wipe it all, fresh factory reset, the narrative thing that Lain was going to do was not going to work out well for her. So.
What zero cost consequences
Yeah.
does to a motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that going back, it's not only that just going back and changing whatever can't not be done. It's that it shouldn't be. Because that's not how closure works. It's not how atonement and redemption and growth works. We're all flawed people who make mistakes in our lives. And we're always going to have bad days because nobody is perfect. And it is rare indeed that you get any kind of closure beyond the closure that is permitted to you, that you deserve, that you earn. The people that you've hurt don't owe you anything. So, the best way to go about it is to try to move through it. These kinds of things that happen are just things you have to carry with you. That's what I found. You never really get over it. You just kind of add it to your wagon and keep going. Because there is no going back. There's only the present and the future. But you need to stay grounded. You can't always be looking forward to the future where everything will be different and fantasizing about however it might be. You can't lose yourself in that dream of different. You need to stay grounded. Because there is no cool flesh monstrosity and boss that you can light into flames with technology to get your shit back together again. I've been involved in leftist organizing and activism and just in general, leftism and social justice and stuff of that nature for 25 years now, friends. My anniversary in doing activism was earlier in February, I believe. I think it was February 16th, I think I told you all. It's nebulous because I'm not exactly sure when I officially started. I just kind of fell into it and checked in and out and didn't really get committed. And that's meandering. But my point is, in all that time that I've spent doing that, I've found over and over again that it's easy for me, has always been easy for me, to forgive other people for hurting me. And forgive slights and help them come to terms with the fact that they were out of line. But harder to forgive myself. In truth, that's the thing that has always hurt me the most. That the person that I have the biggest trouble forgiving has always been and will always be myself. And that I just have to live with the fact that I've done these things when I blew up and lost control. Even though my methods of being able to control were impeded by these illnesses. You can't just take, excuse yourself of the things you've done because you have these mental illnesses. But at the same time, you do not bear the sole burden of blame for what happens when you are besieged by them. Trauma triggers don't just come out of nowhere. Something has traumatized you. Something has triggered them. I did some time where I acted as a candy striper for helping support veterans from Vietnam and Desert Storm and whatever, and talking to them. And what I found is they were all so scarred and haunted by what they did. And one of them, may I bless them, may they rest in power, told me the metaphor that I will now be sharing with all of you, which is that it feels like you're in a minefield, but you don't remember where you buried all the mines. And everybody else is in a minefield as well. And they also don't remember where they buried all the mines. And you're just trying to reach that place together where you can exist and be comfortable. But you never know when you're going to step on one of your mines, or you're going to step on one of their mines, or they're going to want to step on one of your mines, or they're going to step on one of their mines. It's this game of fucking Minesweeper. And if you trip and trigger one, well, fuck. The damage can be extreme. But the most important lesson that I can give any of you is to work on being able to live with that fact of reality, that you're imperfect. And being imperfect is in of itself perfection. It is through that pursuit of self-improvement that we find what we really want in life. And I think people get to this point where they think they have enough, but they're still not happy, so they try to get more of the same. And just diversify your portfolio, people, because there's only so much wealth that you can accumulate, or prestige you can accumulate, or clout you can accumulate before it just doesn't feel like anything anymore. There's the physical, and there's spiritual. Make sure you tend to both. There's no end boss. There's just you and them. The present and the future. And remember to stay grounded in the present. So, Alice. As the foremost Alice expert, what are your feelings?
I gotta do my thing.
Oh, good.
Alright. Anyway, take it from Lain. The internet likes you more if you're not always online.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Anyway.
Before we do our ending bits, does anybody else have anything they want to say?
I think I'm good. I'm sorry. I think I'm good.
All right. Now you can do the bit.
All right, Alice is the foremost expert on Alice's. How did you feel about Alice's episode?
I feel really bad for her because that's a lot to take in, and on top of it, having Lain act the way she does in the middle of all of this has got to make it even worse. And I hope that they are able to understand each other, because right now it does not seem like they're going to be able to.
You got one whole episode
Yep.
for them to talk things out.
Sometimes you just fuck up too bad and they gotta sever. I am rooting for them, though. It's clear that they like each other. I mean, look, it was like, look, the lesbianism happened, and I was like, not like this.
Look, sometimes you just have a really
yeah.
awkward first date where it's just like at one person's house and they're trying to give up their physical body, and then God spawns in the room and you have to kill him with computers, and it's just a mess.
That's what I was going to say, and then Jinder talked for 10 minutes and I forgot. One of my favorite subgenres of fiction is I am a lesbian and I will kill God to protect my girlfriend.
Exactly. It's good. One B,
I love
one me.
Una, and oh god, what was that one manga I sent you like a couple years ago? The Witch and the Shrine Maiden?
Yeah, that was really good.
I love your reaction, just holy shit, she's going to kill God.
Yep.
What's this? God is going to kill my girlfriend? Not if I kill God first.
That's the
Not
logic.
on my watch.
That's right. That's the logic. Yeah.
Not today.
This is just a horrible thing to do somebody, to have that kind of power. Like I said, I think when you fuck up, you always want to go back and try and change it. but that's not how closure happens. You just gotta do your best to reconcile, and if they're done with you, if you've burnt too many bridges, you gotta just let go and move on. I will say that, like, Alice and I
Right.
predicted this, right? When we watched the previous episode and we were like, oh, this isn't going to go well for her. Well, Alice, let's pat ourselves on the back for having read that correctly.
Yeah, that was kind of obvious.
All right. Which means it's time for my ending bit. What's the plot? Where I ask my co-hosts what they think the plot is. We are at the second to last episode, so we should have a pretty good idea of what's going on right now. Don't expect any wild, wild off-base theories this time. Alice, what do you think the plot is?
I think the plot is that, well, it turns out that I wasn't entirely right. I don't think that Lain is sort of a god of the internet. Lain is more like an overly complicated catalyst. And apparently, she existed, she was made a thing to forcibly uplift humanity, but really, she ends up mostly just not understanding them.
I was actually prepared to say, like, how do you feel about the most validating episode for your theory?
So it's both like I'm absolutely right, and also at the same time I'm completely wrong, and it is mind-boggling.
You didn't predict everything, but I think you were exactly right in. Well, how about this? It's not that Lane was becoming a god; it's that Lane was realizing she was always a god.
I mean, kind of, yeah. Like
Either Lain
Lane
is God or she could kill God,
God,
and I don't care which.
Lane is sort of this. Lane is like an emanation of calling it God feels a bit silly, but it's the closest I can get. She's obviously some kind of emanation of it, designed to move. She was supposed to be an epochal event, and she is currently in the process of being an epochal event, a kind of singularity prompting device, if you will. And I'm fascinated by the fact that in the middle of this, she is. What is she doing with it? She's trying to get Alice to like her again. That's really great.
Yeah, I did want to. I mentioned it, but I did want to draw attention to the fact that Ares said that Lane existed before um, he like put her in her current consciousness as a Walker Lane. So like she is something that has existed longer than the teenage girl in Walker Lane has existed. It's just Deus thinks that means that he created her when even he describes it as finding her. It's weird.
Who even knows it's
Right,
Deus
Fafner?
knows what's going on, though? Could just be like crazy Deus stuff. Yeah,
Fafner,
fucking turn.
what do you think the plot is?
Well, it's good to be connected and all, but you should also take care of your physical body. That's important. Don't die playing Final Fantasy XI. And
They
then
don't let you into heaven if you do that.
they will let you into Heaven's Sword, but that's completely different.
Nice.
But yeah, and I guess, Lain being the embodiment of the internet, the emotions you put into connected space is kind of what you get out of it as well. There is a lot to Lain, and Lain is very complex because Lain is a reflection of everyone and everything, but she does have legitimate emotions and does want to connect in of herself. Like in this episode, she talks about, hey, Alice and I haven't connected, but then that's why she likes Alice the most. Alice is
And when
probably, like, she has had the least to do with the Wired, so in that sense they haven't connected, but she's also probably been the most, emotionally available of any character to Lain. So they have connected, just not in
yeah,
the way
it's
Lane's used to.
It's pretty clear that in that final scene, connected is with like a capital C. It's a
Mm.
defined word. It doesn't mean the normal connection.
But it turns out the normal connection is actually the one she wanted all along.
Hmm. Just like the gift of the Magi.
Nice.
I sold my physical body to give you this internet connection.
But I sold my computer to get you things for your physical body. And that's it. That's the story. Somehow this like got published and everything. There's not even a real resolution. It just kind
I
of
like this
abruptly
story. I like
ends.
that it doesn't have a resolution.
I know. Like I've always made fun of
It's
the fact that like you expect. There's always like a part of me that expects something else to happen whenever I read that story. Like there to be some kind of like third act, and there's not.
yeah, I like that even the characters don't explicitly come to the realization they trusted the viewer to do it. Gift of the Magi is kind of a weird story to have been published at the time it was published and find such mainstream
Yeah.
acceptance because it's both very simple and weirdly trusting of its audience in the third act. Anyways, Jenner,
Hey,
what do you think the plot of Serial Experiments Lane is?
I'm sticking to my bet, y'all, that this is a slice of life anime that is teaching us valuable lessons day to day.
A slice of life anemone.
Yep, and just sets it back to zero every episode, just like Family Guy. And the message of this episode is this: did you know that Final Fantasy XIV is free until level 60 up to 7 Sword? And you can play almost every single class available in the game, and you should really try it out.
Damn it, I was hoping you were going to go on longer because I was pulling up the Raid Shadow Legends copy paste.
I wanted everybody to know that love triangles cannot exist without at least one LGBTQ plus person. Cis hetero people need to realize that because you obviously do not know how shapes work.
Wait,
Look,
but what if it's just a lambda? I mean, that's technically kind of a triangle.
that's not a triangle. Look, if you have one straight person attracted to girl and another straight person attracted to girl, that's not a love triangle. It's got to be boy attracted to girl, girl attracted to boy, and then boy attracted to boy. That's
Well,
gay
a love
and girl.
that's a love cycle.
No, that's a love triangle.
Love angle doesn't sound good.
Look,
Love
if
V.
if all three of them aren't involved with each other, it's not a triangle. That's just a love corner. That's a love angle. That's a love
mean,
right angle, not
gonna
a
be
love
honest.
Say
triangle.
what you will, it is acute.
Wow.
That's a lie, it sucks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. The ostensibly straight characters in most love triangles definitely have chemistry.
Exactly. More chemistry.
Wolverine has more chemistry with Cyclops than he has had with any of his girlfriends.
You out here trying to tell me Wolverine's straight? Get the fuck out of here.
Hmm.
Well, anyway, I guess we're just sort of getting off into tangents. So going back into Final Fantasy XIV, let's all just go and make cat girls. Let's just go and stop the podcast, and we'll just make cat girls forever.
My co-host said Wolverine is gay, and then the podcast immediately ended. Next week we'll be finishing the show with layer 13. Until then, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Take care, everybody. Yeah, I'm ready, by the way. I'm ready to love Lain.